Tonight on Reporting Scotland. 2 guests die in a major fire at the luxury Cameron House Hotel on Loch Lomond.
The Fire and Rescue Service's condolences go out to the people who are involved in this tragic incident, and our thoughts are very much with the family and the friends of the 2 people who have lost their life this morning.
Also in the programme, 3 health boards cut spending on children's mental health services, even though they aren't meeting their waiting time targets. The remarkable story of a woman who can smell Parkinson's disease and how this discovery could lead to an early diagnosis. We hear how this Syrian family are settling in as Scotland reaches its goal of bringing 2,000 refugees here. And after Celtic's unbeaten run of domestic matches ends, their captain says he's proud of their record. Good evening. 2 people have died after a fire at the luxury Cameron House Hotel on Loch Lomond. The blaze broke out just before 7 o'clock this morning. 200 people were evacuated from the building, and fire crews have spent much of the day trying to put out the blaze. Well, our reporter Katrina Renton is at the hotel for us tonight. Katrina.
As hotel guests were sleeping, the fire broke out. 2 people lost their lives. 3 members of the same family, one of them a child, were taken to Glasgow to hospital for treatment. They've now been discharged. Tonight, inquiries continue into how this fire started. The smoke could be seen for miles around as the hotel burned. Just after 20 to 7 this morning, the emergency services were called. A fire had started in the main building of Cameron House. Fire crews arrived in less than 10 minutes. 200 people were inside. 1 person, a hotel guest, died at the scene. Another guest, who was taken to hospital, died there. 3 others, 2 adults and a child, were taken to hospital in Glasgow. Others were treated for smoke inhalation on site. Ainsley Huxham told us how she got out.
I woke up to the fire alarm. We couldn't actually smell any burning until we left our hotel room, but I just thought it was a fire alarm. 5 stairs down from our room, we seen a whole room full of smoke and flames. So we had to escape, run back down the hall, tapped on everyone's doors and shouting fire. And by the time we had actually got outside, the whole field was full of people.
We continue to work with our partners to establish the exact cause of the fire, and this will go on for some considerable time.
It's now more than 7 hours since the fire broke out, and you can see that there's still plenty of activity from the emergency services here. And as you can see, they're still working to tackle what's left of the blaze. Throughout the day, fire crews worked to dampen down the blaze and search the hotel, which has 130 bedrooms.
The fire has caused extensive damage to the central section of the hotel. Our crews have been working tirelessly since 7 o'clock this morning. We've had 14 fire appliances at its height tackling this fire, and more than 70 firefighters. As you can imagine, as well as being an absolutely tragic incident for those that have lost their lives, it's an extremely complicated incident and fire to contain.
Cameron House is a 5-star hotel, a favourite with celebrities and a popular wedding venue. The part of the hotel where the fire took hold is now not much more than a shell, as firefighters continue to douse it with water to keep it cool. The hotel is now closed while the damage is assessed, and tonight investigations continue to find out how this fire started here. The hotel has put a statement on its website. Now it says it will be closed for at least 72 hours while the damage is assessed. You'll see behind us that the emergency services are still here this evening, and we can expect them to be present overnight as the police and fire service work together to establish exactly what happened here. Jackie.
Thank you very much, Katrina Renton there. The BBC has learned that 3 Scottish health boards are planning to spend less this year on children's mental health services than they did in 2016, even though they're failing to meet waiting time targets. One has cut its spending plans by nearly £400,000. Here's our health and social care correspondent, Shelley Joffrey.
Gordon Edwards from Bathgate struggled for 2 years with hallucinations and anxiety.
It was horrendous. I had low mood, which means I couldn't be bothered getting out of bed, I couldn't be bothered showering, I couldn't be bothered doing anything.
He says he couldn't get help from his local child and adolescent mental health service, or CAMHS. It was only when he was 18 and suicidal, adult mental health services stepped in.
Compared to the treatment I got as a child, there's not really a comparison because it was that bad. The CAMHS service just did not care at all, and there needs to be changes made to make sure that children and young people get the care that they deserve.
Dr Richard Simpson asked all Scotland's health boards what they're spending on CAMHS this year. In Lothian, it's £9.69 million, a cut of almost £400,000. Yet less than 2/3 of young people there are being seen within 18 weeks. Grampian's spending £5.18 million this year, a cut of £80,000. Yet it's the worst performing board on waiting times, seeing just 1/3 of young people on time.
I was shocked because if they cut the expenditure, they're almost certainly going to do it in third sector organisations and in what's called Tier 2, which are the lower services, rather than the medical services. So this means that the sort of preventive element, the early intervention, is actually being made even worse.
The boys at this residential school often need mental health support. Long waits just compound the problems.
We're talking about anxiety, depression, behavioural issues, ADHD. All of these factors contribute to real problems across all aspects of a young person's family's life. So I think any wait is difficult, but a wait of 20 weeks can be really, really challenging.
NHS Grampian says it's focusing on urgent cases for now, while Lothian says it's prioritising those who've been waiting longest. The Scottish Government says it will keep working with health boards across Scotland to reduce waiting times. Shelley Joffrey reporting, Scotland.
And there's to be a further delay in opening Edinburgh's new children's hospital. The Royal Hospital for Sick Children was originally scheduled to open in July of this year. That date has been pushed back twice. A new completion date of May 2018 was announced last August. Now, a further update has been issued by NHS Lothian, blaming factors including bad weather and saying the aim was to open the hospital in autumn 2018. Well, now to the remarkable story of a woman who can smell Parkinson's. There's no definitive diagnostic test for the condition, but prompted by Joy Milne's ability, scientists are now working on the molecules responsible for the odour. And as Elizabeth Quigley reports, it could lead to a simple test and earlier diagnosis.
Joy Milne from Perth has a quite incredible sense of smell. She knew her husband Les had Parkinson's before he was diagnosed because his smell changed.
It was a new smell. I didn't know what it was. I had not met it anywhere else, so it wasn't in my memory. I kept on thinking, goodness, this smell. And I kept on saying to him, but you're not showering. What's wrong? What are you doing? And he became quite upset about it. He really did. So I just had to be quiet.
She only linked this to Parkinson's after they joined a support group, and she could smell it everywhere. Les died 2 years ago at the age of 65, but before then, Joy's accuracy was tested. So could her ability change things for patients?
So you can imagine a small collection of fairly inexpensive tests, and a skin swab for an odour would be very inexpensive. That's a game changer if you can give someone a very accurate prediction if they're on the verge of Parkinson's based on molecular signatures on their skin.
And that's led this scientist in Manchester to try to track them down.
So here we have 10 features, 10 molecules that are distinctive to that population, and so we think that those molecules may well be what Joy is smelling, because this type of analysis was most similar to Joy's smell.
And in the future that could lead to a simple diagnostic test and make a real difference to people living with Parkinson's. Elizabeth Quigley reporting, Scotland.
And you can see more on that story and the woman who can smell Parkinson's at 7:30 this evening on BBC One Scotland and afterwards on the BBC iPlayer. Almost 40% of accident and emergency treatments in winter gripped Aberdeen in recent days were the result of slips and falls. The cold snap has led to widespread complaints about untreated pavements and roads. A total of 338 of around 850 attendances to Aberdeen Royal Infirmary's emergency department over the weekend were blamed on ice, snow, slips, trips or falls. The BBC understands 17 jobs are to be lost at the Uist rocket range. Kinetic have reduced the work being carried out in Ballyvanich, where the majority of jobs will be lost. The jobs are with subcontracting companies which administer the rocket range. The broadcasting regulator Ofcom is investigating Alex Salmond's programme on the RT network, formerly known as Russia Today. The watchdog is examining the first episode of the show to decide whether it broke accuracy rules. It included a series of tweets presented as coming from the audience, and it's understood the investigation centres on allegations that that was not the case, following at least one complaint. The leader of the SNP at Westminster has again called for the devolved administrations to be fully involved in the negotiations for the second phase of the Brexit talks. Ian Blackford made his call as the Prime Minister reported to the Commons that talks about trade and the transition period were to begin. Well, our political correspondent David Porter joins me now from Westminster. Has anything changed, David, to make the involvement of the devolved administrations more likely?
Well, Jackie, the Prime Minister came to the House of Commons this afternoon to update MPs on the way the Brexit process was going. And she gave a fairly upbeat estimate, saying that she believed that it was going to be an orderly transition to Brexit. She also reaffirmed as well that come the 29th of March 2019, the UK will leave the European Union. And although there will be a transition period, perhaps significantly for Scotland, it means that the UK at that point will leave the European agricultural and the European fishing policies. But she was pressed by the SNP on what role there would be now for the devolved administrations, including the Scottish Government, in this crucial second phase of talks.
Members on these benches welcome the progress to phase 2 of the negotiations as agreed by all EU member states. Council President Donald Tusk wasn't kidding though when he commented that phase 2 will be dramatically difficult. It is imperative, Mr Speaker, that the devolved administrations are included in phase 2 negotiations, and I call on the Prime Minister today to agree to that.
We have, as he knows, been discussing with the devolved administrations through the process of phase 1, and we will continue to discuss engage the devolved administrations as we move into this second phase of negotiations. My right honourable friend, the First Secretary, meets the Scottish and Welsh governments regularly to discuss issues of concern to them.
Now, those talks between the UK and the Scottish governments under the auspices of the so-called JMC have been going on for some time. Both sides say that progress has been made, but there is a long, long way to go. Now, they say that they believe that if they carry on talking, they might be able to make progress. But at the moment, the Scottish government says that it is not in a position to recommend to Holyrood that it approves the Brexit legislation. They will start talking again after Christmas in January. As they say, they believe that they are moving forward, but no one is betting that there will be any type of breakthrough between the Scottish and the UK governments anytime soon.
David, thank you. Now, time check for you. It's almost 17 minutes to 7. A reminder of tonight's main story. 2 guests have been killed in a fire at a luxury hotel on Loch Lomond. And still to come, after a successful year, Scottish speed skater Elise Christie is focusing on adding Olympic gold to her collection. 2 years ago, the Scottish Government made a commitment to welcome 2,000 Syrian refugees to the country as part of the UN resettlement programme. Well, that goal has been achieved 3 years ahead of schedule. Lisa Summers has met one family who set up home in Edinburgh.
Life is very much okay for 6-year-old Addie. With Dad Omar, Mum Fatima and little sister Sarah, they were one of the first refugee families to come to Scotland in 2015.
We like Edinburgh, and I would like to say thank you for everybody who support us and encourage us to live here in Edinburgh because we were looking for to be safe, and I think we find the safe here in Edinburgh.
The family fled Damascus, living for a time in Lebanon where Sarah was born.
Every day we heard a lot of sound, and Adi was very scared all time, because when you hear the sound of bomb and you see your children scared, you can't stay.
Today they met the First Minister, celebrating the success of the resettlement programme that has now welcomed 2,000 refugees to Scotland. Every part of Scotland has agreed to support refugees, but the programme has not been without some challenges.
It's perhaps unrealistic to expect that there will never be any issues, never be any problems. And of course, the people who are coming seeking refuge here are facing a whole host of different challenges. But generally speaking, I think we can and should be really proud of the way Scottish communities have responded. I have long said I think the UK could do even more to help with the Syrian refugee crisis. And if it does, then Scotland stands ready to play our part.
The bombing in Syria continues.
The aftermath of the latest airstrike.
This was the rebel-held suburbs of Damascus only a few weeks ago. Omar and Fatima constantly worry about their parents who still live there. Adi says he likes being here in Scotland.
Edinburgh is very, very good for me, but I like Syria.
The family's experience of Scotland has been a positive one. Local authorities have committed to continue the programme, with more refugee families expected in the new year. Lisa Summers reporting Scotland, Edinburgh.
A deal has finally been reached on teachers' pay after months of negotiations. It would see teachers get a 1% rise backdated from April, followed by another rise in January, taking the total to 2%. There are also changes to the pay arrangements for supply teachers. The EIS said it was pleased the rise exceeded the normal cap on public sector pay. A new 70-mile-an-hour speed limit will be introduced on the Queensferry crossing from tomorrow. It follows the completion of resurfacing work. Our reporter Stephen Godden is there for us tonight. Stephen.
Yeah, Jackie, the bridge has been edging towards this point. When it first opened in August, the speed limit was 40 miles an hour. That was increased to 50 miles an hour. But before it could go up to the maximum 70 miles an hour, resurfacing work had to be carried out around the bridge expansion joints at either end. Now that was the so-called snagging work that led to the partial closure of the bridge earlier this month. Now rarely has a road repair received so much attention, but driving across the bridge tonight, the smooth ride at either end was an indication that it is now finished. What that means is that it can go up to 70 miles an hour. That will take effect from tomorrow, and while drivers won't always be able to do that speed, the Transport Minister believes it will make a big difference.
During peak periods, of course, the morning peak periods, evening peak periods, there would be congestion. So, you have to drive to the conditions out with those times, and looking at weekends in particular. This is going to mean overall journey time improvements, and that can only be good for not just the people of Fife and people of Edinburgh, but people, of course, travelling across that arterial route.
Well, the next step is expected in the new year when motorway regulations take effect. At that point, the two bridges will start working in tandem. The Forth Road Bridge, the older bridge, will become a public transport corridor. While all that is going on, though, snagging work will continue on the bridge behind me. The Transport Minister today reiterating something that the First Minister said, that was that work would mean that as it's going on, there would be no peak time lane closures on the bridge behind me.
Thank you very much, Stephen, and hopefully we'll get working on our own technical problems with our satellite feed. Climbers have been warned to prepare for changing weather conditions after two mountaineers were rescued from the Cairngorms at the weekend. The two men were experienced climbers but were tackling a route known as Jacob's Ladder without ropes when they became stuck in freezing conditions. Unable to go up or down, the pair were eventually lifted to safety by members of the Cairngorm Mountain Rescue Team. The last available bag, like the one Meghan Markle carried on her first royal engagement, has sold for £1,819 in a charity auction, almost 4 times the retail price. The Midi Tote Tricolour, based on the Edinburgh-based Strathberry company, sold out within 11 minutes after images emerged showing Prince Harry's future wife carrying the bag on the couple's visit to Nottingham earlier this month. Football now, and Scott Brown says it was one of the proudest moments of his life to captain Celtic into the history books. After Hearts ended their streak yesterday, the champions' run of 69 matches without defeat across all domestic competitions is a new British record. Cerdan Idzan can tell us more.
Ceremonial duties this afternoon for the club captain as Celtic extended their retail empire. But they couldn't extend their long unbeaten streak. Hearts made sure of that in quite some style.
It's Invincibles no more!
Celtic nonetheless left with a new British football record, 69 domestic matches in a row without defeat.
It's one of the proudest achievements that I've probably done in my career. It's an honour to be captain of this club, and to do it with 69 undefeated in 19 months, I think it is exceptional.
And a place in history, obviously.
Yeah, it'll go down in history, but history is meant to be rewritten.
Celtic were bound to lose at some point. What wasn't expected, perhaps, was conceding 4 goals to Hearts for the first time in well over half a century. So, is the result just a blip, or do Celtic have second season syndrome? Brendan Rodgers' men only drew 4 matches in his first term, losing none and only dropping 8 points. By December 17th this season, however, Celtic have already drawn 5 matches, finally lost a domestic game and have shipped 13 points. So do we have a proper title race now?
I still expect Celtic to win the league, but 100% there's a title race on at the moment. I think you've got to give huge credit to the other teams that they're within touching distance at this stage, and that shows the huge job and the accolades that have been thrown at Celtic. Also, then you've got to give huge accolade to the other teams that they're actually maintaining that gap that's not too big.
Teenage talent like 16-year-old Harry Cochrane helped put an end to some impressive Celtic statistics. At the end, together in defeat as they had been in victory. Celtic invincible in Scotland no more, but history makers all the same. Cerdan Idzan reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
And 2017 has also been quite a year for the Scottish speed skater Elise Christie. As a triple world champion, she was recognised with a nomination for Sports Personality of the Year. But now her focus is on adding Olympic gold to her collection. Alistair Lamont reports.
Please welcome Elise Christie.
Last night's was not Elise Christie's first glittering ceremony of the year. No podium place this time, but acknowledgement still of her endeavour.
It's a really crazy sport. We're skating around on that millimetre thick blade at over 35 miles an hour, and every day I feel like I'm going to fall, It's so scary.
Not as scary as the online death threats that followed this disqualification, one of 3 she suffered at the 2014 Sochi Olympics. Does she view next year's Games in South Korea as a chance for redemption?
I feel like the World Championships finished that off for me. I put Sochi behind me. I achieved the biggest thing in short track you can ever achieve. So for me, I put it to bed, and the Olympics is just to go out and enjoy it and do as well as I can. And I believe going in that I am capable of winning every distance.
That is not misplaced confidence. Christie, out in Korea to promote the Games recently, is among Team GB's strongest gold medal contenders. And she's a role model for another young Scot on the team.
She's inspirational, every day at training, seeing her at competitions. I was there at World Championships in the Netherlands when she obviously became triple world champion, and it's amazing to have her train with us.
Learning from the best may yet turn Catherine Thompson into Scotland's next world speed skating champion. But for now, it's Christie herself who can book a place on 2018's end-of-year award lists with Olympic gold in Pyeongchang. Alistair Lamont reporting Scotland.
Well, from the Winter Olympics to the winter weather, Causer.
Well, Jackie, there's a change on its way, actually. We're losing that cold air
Good evening to you all. Well, for most of us, it has been a dry end to the day. There has been more in the way of cloud around, and compared to the cold weather we've had of late, we're starting to see that change. Over the weekend, we've started to see milder air coming in from the Atlantic on southwesterly winds, and we're seeing that gradual change over the next day or so as temperatures start to rise. But for parts of the east, it still is quite chilly tonight, and especially where we have snow on the ground, we could even see a touch of frost, maybe the risk of some icy stretches still. But for most of us tonight, it's dry, it's cloudy, and we'll start to see some mist and fog forming as we're drawing in that moist air, low cloud, especially for western coastal areas. And while we do still have high pressure in charge, we'll start to see a little bit of that rain edging in later for tomorrow. But for tonight, a freshening southwesterly wind, strong across parts of the Western Isles and Northern Isles too, and elsewhere some mist, some murk, some low cloud, extensive hill fog, and temperatures by the end of the night climbing up to above freezing for most, maybe even up to 9 to 10 or 11 Celsius across parts of the northwest. So then, for the course of the morning, cloudy, mild, breezy conditions, and some of that rain, light and patchy in nature across parts of the Northwest Highlands, the Western Isles as well. So if you're heading out around 3 o'clock, we are expecting quite a bit of dry weather around. There may be some patchy light rain over the hills of Dumfries and Galloway, but for most of the south, the central belt too, largely dry but cloudy. The best chance of any brightness perhaps across the northeast, and here temperatures could climb up to 13 or 14 Celsius for parts of Inverness, maybe the Moray Firth area and Caithness too. Further towards the northwest, that rain edging into Shetland as well. So we are seeing that change. And for Tuesday night into Wednesday, we'll see this weak front spreading in across the country, bringing with it some rain for a time. But by the time we reach Wednesday, it will be largely dry. Still some mist and murks, maybe some patchy light rain across the Solway. The best chance of any brightness on Wednesday will likely be across the north of the country. And temperatures maybe a degree or two lower, but still quite mild for the time of year, around 8 to 10 Celsius. And it is still fairly breezy across the north. By the time we reach Thursday, though, well, there will be a lot of dry weather. We still have high pressure holding on. Temperatures maybe a degree or two lower compared to what they have been. We're looking at around 7 to 8 Celsius. Shetland, I'm afraid, holding on to any wet weather. Some rain here, some stronger winds. Elsewhere, the winds will be light and there will be some spells of sunshine. So holding on to milder weather, at least for the next few days. That's your forecast.
Thank you very much, Cozo. And now a reminder of tonight's main news. 2 people have died after a fire at the luxury Cameron House Hotel on Loch Lomond. The blaze broke out just before 7 o'clock this morning. 200 people were evacuated from the building. And a review of fire and building regulations following the Grenfell Tower disaster says the current system isn't fit for purpose and that a culture change is required to ensure safety is prioritised over cost. And that's Reporting Scotland. I'm back with the headlines at 8 and our main evening bulletin at 10:25. But from all the team for now, good evening.